And yesterday we were able to experience a practice AP exam. And today we'd like to talk about how the exam went and how you would finish the exam in the time allotted, and also some other details about the AP Music Theory exam that I can help you with. So hopefully you were able to get an answer sheet yesterday and in preparation for the test. That is one thing. If you're going to take the second practice exam tomorrow with Mrs. Foote, I highly encourage you to go and get a couple of answer sheets and maybe some manuscript paper that you could use as scratch paper when you do the test tomorrow. So I'm going to share my screen here, and then I have this PowerPoint for you this morning, and we will review the test that we did yesterday. So once again, I'm Dr. Eder. Been with you many times in the last few weeks. Okay, so these are some important links that I put up. I had talked about these last week on one of the days, but I put them up here again because this gives you a lot of answers for how you will take the AP Music Theory exam, and hopefully we were able to simulate that experience for you yesterday. The only thing we were not able to simulate was the actual submission. I showed you the slide where it would show you how to submit. I want to try and talk about that a little more again today, about how you submit both the question 1, which has the part writing from figure bass and part writing from Roman numerals, and also how you would record and submit the sight singing performances that you will do in the second part of the exam. So this first link right here has just about everything in it. And we can begin just by looking down here on this keep in mind section. And it says for question 1, that's the part writing questions, prepare your answer sheet before exam day. On exam day, you'll write your response by hand and submit a photo of your completed answer sheet. Okay, so and then if you go to that this one, there are more questions. I'm sorry, more explanations there about this. It says you should prepare your answer sheet about 1 week before the May 19th exam. And you can download the answer sheet right here and just print it off. If you just click on that, see, there is the answer sheet. I've got another one that I'll show you as we get into reviewing the actual test from yesterday, okay? And it says print or copy by hand the answer sheet before exam day. You'll submit a photo, pardon me, of your completed answer sheet for question 1. If you don't have a printer, you'll need to create the answer sheet by hand, and so on. You could actually draw it off if you want to, or you might get someone else to print it for you if you don't have a printer, and maybe send it to you on email, something like that. But that should help you as we are talking about that. Whoops, I didn't mean to go all the way back there. I want to go back down here again. For question 2, to submit your response, you'll need an audio recording app or software on your device. And you will record and submit an audio file, and the file types are shown there. And we'll talk about that again a little bit later. Learn about test dates and times, timing, questions, and more on the exam page. Review the AP Music Theory exam page before exam day so you know what to expect and how best to prepare. Okay, so we'll come back to that link. And I think with some of these other ones that I had on this particular page with the links, there are some, this will make the review of yesterday's test be those examples today. So let's go on to that if we can go. There's what I showed you just a moment ago. There is the answer sheet. And so you see that it is completely blank, except for the grand staff and the time signature, and then the lines for the Roman numerals down below there. Up above, you would write your APID number in there and your initials. And so that's what that looks like. So yesterday, the test, the actual exam that we were taking looked like this. And I said in the right side there that you could find the complete question at tinyurl.com at AP Music Theory Sample Questions. You know, and there it describes and talks about the question. Actually, we can probably look at that at the end of our discussion today if we have time. So question 1A is part writing from figure base. Question 1B is part writing from Roman numerals. So you have to, at the beginning of the time, complete filling out the prompt. So you would have to write the key signature for each of these. You would have to write in the given first chord. And in question 1A, for the figured bass question, you would have to write the bass line and write underneath the notes that the symbols are shown, the figured bass symbols, 6 sharp, 4 2, 6, and 7 sharp. And then of course the key is given to you. So this would be the key of F sharp minor. And then in 1B, you would have to once again write the key signature and the first chord that's given, and then the Roman numerals, A flat major, colon, and then the Roman numerals underneath that on the answer sheet. Okay, so hopefully you can do that pretty fast. I want to remind you that you've got to be really careful about writing it exactly correctly. For instance, if you're going along and you forget to write 6/4 on the one chord in the Roman numerals, then that would cause you a problem because it wouldn't be in the right position. Okay, so be very careful and copy down exactly as it's shown in the prompt. So here was my answer sheet. And I just made up an APID number since I don't really have one. ABCD 1 2 3 4, and then I put my initials TE in there. And then you can see in my handwriting, I copied all of the things we have just talked about, and I double checked to be sure I had copied them all correctly. And then I went about answering the questions, part writing these two progressions. And I typically would try and take in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 minutes to do the figure bass, and the Roman numeral one maybe can go a little faster. And that way, the 25 minutes, you have 25 minutes total before the timer, the 5-minute timer in red comes on to say you've got to take a photo of it and so on. And we'll talk about that as we go along. So the first thing that I do is I do a chord matrix, because in F sharp minor, I don't want to have to keep thinking about how to spell those chords or anything. And in the throes of the exam itself, when adrenaline is running high and everything, sometimes it's easy to go too fast and so on. So I have this chord matrix. Now, I would just make a suggestion to you about this. I mean, I have these for every key, both major and minor keys. And of course, in minor, you can see, excuse me, that I also include the leading tone. The leading tone in the key of F sharp minor is E sharp. And that's an accidental that you will have to write in the music because it's not in the key signature. And I'm sure you all know this already by now. And so then if you look at the two diminished chord in F sharp minor, it's a G sharp, B, D, F sharp chord, okay? Diminished triad and minor seventh between the G sharp up to the F sharp. And that little half diminished sign, it's not a real half diminished sign. I couldn't find one where you had the little degree circle with the slash through it. So I just had to use something else, but it kind of looks like a half diminished symbol, hopefully to you. Okay, so, and then A flat major, the key signature, B, E, A, D, those flats, and then the chords, in a diatonic context there. So I would suggest that maybe you write out some of these chord matrices in preparation for the test, like just as an assignment for yourself, and maybe even put them on cards or something. These would fit nicely on just note cards. And then on the day of the test, that's one of the things that I would have handy, or you could even write these on a sheet of paper, and I would say at least 4 sharps and 4 flats, maybe. And so that might take you a little while to write those out, but the time it might save you on the AP exam would be pretty amazing. And Mrs. Foote gave you an example of something like that too. So whatever might work for you. And again, if you don't need something like this, then don't worry about it. Okay, here's the first step that I take in part writing these. I always make sure that I pay attention to that leading tone. And so we were in the key of F sharp minor yesterday. And so I put a little line down from the key there and put E sharp, just to remind myself that probably there's going to be an E sharp. And so I'm going to have to write an accidental on that note. And sure enough, as we look through, yes, there were 2 5/7 chords. One was in third inversion and the other was a root position chord, 5/7. And so those have the note E sharp in there because we're raising that 7th scale degree to leading tone to make that 5 a major a major chord, a dominant 7th chord in this case. So I went through and figured out, for example, the first chord is given to us, it's an F sharp, A, C sharp chord, and it's a 1 chord. The next chord is root position, so it's a D, F sharp, A chord. And then the 2 diminished chord is in a first inversion, or you can think about 6 above that B, B, C, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, and G sharp would be the root of that chord. And then there's that understood 3. If you think about inversion, 6s invert to 3s, right? So that's where that implied 3 comes from. And so it's a G sharp, B, D chord, a 2 diminished in first inversion. And there's our 5, 4, 2, third inversion, dominant 7th chord. And then another first inversion chord. This is a 1 in first inversion, an F sharp, A, C sharp chord. And there's the root position dominant 7th leading to, oh, this is a deceptive cadence, isn't it? And so it goes to a 6 major chord instead of a 1 chord. And 6 is a major chord in minor keys. All right. So I've got my roadmap down there. And by the way, I use those arrows to remind myself that that B needs to resolve to A in the next chord each time, from the 5/4/2 to the 1/6, as well as from the 5/7 to the 6 major. Okay. Second step, I like to write a melody. Now, Mrs. Foote does it where she writes each chord one at a time. That will work for you. I just am a very linear person. I move, music for me moves through time horizontally, and the vertical is pretty much for my listening a result of what's happening with putting those lines together. And also, I think that for me, if I can write a good melody line with plenty of contrary and oblique motion between the soprano and bass line, it's probably going to make it easier for me to write in the alto and tenor. And so that's my next step. And in this case, the second note that I chose, I had a choice of D. Okay, well, I didn't choose D because that would have been pretty big skips, up a fourth, down a fifth. And so I steered away from that note. I could have chosen F sharp. It would have been down a third, and that would work. I'm pretty sure it would be getting things pretty close together vertically. And so I chose to keep the tone common. So A is common to both the 1 chord and the 6 major chord. So I kept the A for my second melody note. And the third melody note, I went in contrary motion. So I chose B. And from the B, anything I was going to do there was going to be oblique with the bass. So I would have been okay had I gone up to C sharp. I could have done that. I could have done probably G sharp like I did. And I could have kept B most likely, but I chose to make the melody a little interesting. And I'll tell you, if you can make these lines, these voices conjunct, and maybe don't skip more than a third in the soprano, that would be to your best way of thinking for making a melody that has some interest, but also doesn't skip around and do weird things. And then I did do similar motion here. I had to take B to A, so I didn't want to do A in this particular case to the 1/6. I didn't want to do C sharp, so I went down to F sharp, and it's in similar motion with the bass line, but it's uh, a sixth from B up to G sharp and a sixth from A up to F sharp. So sixth and parallel motion, remember, are quite good. They work very well. And then I saw for myself that I could have, since I landed on do at the beginning of the second measure, I decided that I could have a do-ti-do ending, which is what I chose to do. So do-ti-do. So that's how I arrived at that melody. And I think it's a very good melody to go with that bass line. The bass line is a little conjunct, it has skips, but thirds all of the time. And so it works very well, those two lines together. Okay, the next step, of course, is to write in the other two voices. And in this particular case, you can see that they worked out really quite well with that soprano line and going along with that bass line, because they are conjunct. The tenors have one skip there, if we want to call it a skip of a third, from G sharp down to E sharp, from the third beat of the first measure to the fourth beat. But other than that, it's all conjunct motion. It's all stepwise motion. And we have to look back now and see if we have any parallels. And I did, most of the time, I tried to double things, which would keep me in a linear style with the alto and tenor, where they're moving, very much conjunctly and moving together without many parallels, and certainly not unacceptable parallels. But you can see that in this particular case, in the first to the second chord, there's no problems with parallels. It's oblique. The only, the bass moves down, the alto moves up. In the next, the second beat to the third beat, it looks like we've got parallel motion between the soprano and the tenor. So the tenor has an F sharp, the soprano has an A on the second beat. On the third beat, the tenors have G sharp and the the sopranos have B. So that's parallel thirds. Those are great. And then we still have some parallel motion between the soprano and the tenor on the third beat to the fourth beat. And it's a G sharp up to a B in the third beat, and then E sharp up to G sharp. And there's where we have that E sharp in the dominant seventh chord. And so you have to put that accidental on it. And keep this in mind, if you didn't put that accidental on that note, you would have spelled the chord wrong. And then, according to the scoring rubrics, you would have lost 1 point for spelling the chord wrong simply because you didn't put that accidental, the sharp, on the E. And you would have lost the points for moving from the third beat to the fourth beat, voice leading, and from the fourth beat across the bar line to the first beat. So that's 2 points and 2 points for the voice leading, and you would have lost 5 points just by leaving that accidental off. So that's why I always remind myself in ways to remind myself that I've got to put that accidental on to raise the seventh scale degree to leading tone in minor keys. And it's going to happen again on the penultimate chord, the dominant seventh, the 5/7 in root position. Okay. And so at any rate, those thirds were fine in parallel between the soprano and the tenor again. And then on the next one, we've got 3 voices. We know that the soprano and the bass is okay, but let's look from soprano down to alto. And that would be C sharp up to G sharp down to, oh, I see, it's oblique in the alto, so no problem. And the soprano and the tenor are okay, so everything's fine with that one. And then the last chord, let's see, we've got a fourth between C sharp up to F sharp, and then B, and then the dominant seventh, the chordal seventh of that chord has to go to A, which you see it does in the alto. Okay, so that was that question completed. And then I moved on to the next question. I'll go a little bit faster with it. And this one didn't take quite as long for me, but remember I have my chord matrix. So I could look at the Roman numerals and I could say, oh, 1, and look at my chord matrix and say, oh, well, that's an A flat, C, E flat chord. And then I could look at a 5 chord and I could see the 5 chord and then so on. So that wrote the bass line for me, and this was a very conjunct bass line, do, re, mi, fa, sol, sol, do, like that. And then the next step was I wrote in a soprano melody. Wow, that's a nice melody to go with that bass line, and it's very conjunct as well. And it's mi, re, do, 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 ti, do, nice melody. And then I wrote in the alto and tenor parts, and they are all this one worked out to be really very conjunct. And one thing about the 2-6-5 there is I couldn't resolve the chordal seventh in the next chord in that cadential 6/4 chord. So I had to keep it in the same voice. And you see that I kept it in the soprano, and then it resolved down in the 5/7. So the A flat went down to G in that next to the last chord. Okay. And so hopefully this one you can do. And I would say if you finish the figured bass one in 12 minutes or so, you could probably finish this one in the time. And then when the 25 minutes is up, the timer goes on. And then what you would need to do, there's my completed answer sheet. Everything's filled in. I tried to write neatly, and you can see I did pretty good, I think. And then what I did was I took a photo, and I wanted to show you this because there's my photo. And depending on what you're doing the test, whether if you're doing it on a phone or an iPad or a tablet, or if you're on a computer, you would need to have this file where you can submit it, where on the test. Okay. And so one thing that I want to call your attention to is how I tried to line this up where in the photo, all of the complete answer sheet in a very straight kind of way. I kind of was just slightly crooked. So you have to hold your phone in a good way to take that picture like that. All right. And then of course you would submit it like we talked about yesterday, and then go on to question 2. And these were the melodies that we had to practice and then perform and record, and then we would submit. Now, there have been some questions online about recording these and how you would submit them. If you were to, for example, like these, rather than go through the melodies themselves, I mean, we could do this. We could go do, mi, re, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, sol, mi, fa, mi, re, do. And then you would practice that. And you've got 15 minutes to do these. So that's pretty good timing. You could practice this. You could use a keyboard like I'm doing and give yourself pitches. You could play the whole thing for yourself. The next one thing you have to be sure of is figuring out which one's in minor, which one's in major. For instance, that first one is in D major. You can see that. And then look at the key signature for the second one. It is either E flat major or C minor. Well, it doesn't begin or end on E flat. So I don't think it's E flat major. Please don't sing it in E flat major. Sing it in C minor. That's the key it's in. So you've always got to worry about being sure you read the key signature and read the first and last notes of the melody, and be sure you're in the right key. And so this one was, where was my C again? Do, do, ti, do, re, do, sol, fi, sol, la, ti, do, sol, fa, me, re, do. And I gave just a little hesitation there at the end. Hopefully it wasn't enough to lose the flow point. Okay, here's what I'd like to do. I'm back to this page. I want to talk about the downloading audio software, audio recording software, or the app. So here again, it says for question 2, you'll need audio recording software or an app to record your sight singing responses. You'll then attach your file to the online exam. Now, I know you young people, you students probably know how to do this better than I do, because you're putting photos on Facebook and Instagram and all of these ways. But here's the thing that you've got to do. You've got to figure out now what recording software you're going to use. And there are suggestions down here, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And then, like if you're doing this on an iPhone or an Android, you've got to figure out how to make that file be on a place that you can submit it to the test. And I mean, you could, for instance, if you've got a computer going and that's where you're submitting your answers for the test, and then you're recording on your phone, you can email that to your computer and then it'll be ready to submit. So those kinds of things you're going to have to decide and practice before the test how you're going to do this, okay? So it says, yeah, just what I said, 1 week before the May 19th exam. I would start practicing that now. You've got the time. And I think, once again, if you don't know how to do this, ask one of your friends, because a lot of you young people know how to do this, I'm certain of, because if I can do it, you can certainly do it. Uh, because I'm an old guy. Okay, so the recording software needs to generate one of these file types. Now, for instance, if I use on my iPhone voice memos, it does that automatically. So an M4A, an MP3, or a WAV, a WAV file, as we call it, or OGG. Those are the four that you can use. Most people use MP3s. I think some recording software uses M4As. That's fine. If you've got, like if you decided to use Audacity, I'll talk about that in just a minute, that automatically will export WAV files. If you wanted to export MP3s from Audacity, you would have to download another piece of software. It's called LAME. And on their download, and right here in this update, it shows for PC, and actually, I think for a lot of Macs, except the very newer ones, that use Catalina operating system, they'll use Audacity as well. But for example, on Android, Recorder, Google LLC, or other free downloadable voice memo app. So you need, if you're on Android, you need to figure out what app you are going to want to use. For iPhone, voice memos, you can't go wrong with voice memos. It works really, really well. There are some other ones too, like I do, let's see, what else do I have? I've got some, I use Clear Record. I use another one also that's a little bit more sophisticated, but voice memos will work great. And then if you are going to submit on your phone, you'll need to figure out where to put that recording to have it available to submit. And if you're on PC or Mac, you can just off of your phone, email that to your Mac or your PC, and then you've got a file ready to submit right on your, you can put it on your desktop or wherever. GarageBand also works on the Mac if you know how to do that. I would rather use something really simple like voice memos. Audacity is really pretty simple, and you can get that one done too. Okay, so hopefully what I've said to you here is you need to prepare now. Figure out what you're going to use for your recording software, practice using it, practice getting the file in a place where you will know how you could attach or you could submit. And if you're looking at some of the AP exam demos, you know, disciplines that are writing or typing, they do it differently. So we have to look at our things like this, where it's explaining to us exactly how we're going to submit on ours. Okay, I want to go back to this, and I'm going to go back up here to taking the music theory exam. Okay, how the exam works. So we've already talked about that. And then question 2 gives you specific instructions using your preferred software or app. And here are the instructions about the recording itself. You'll be instructed to pause your recording at specific times in order to prepare each melody. And this includes finding your starting pitches and so on. Your 2 responses need to be in one file. That's why that pause button is really, really important. There are the file types again. There are no requirements for naming your file. You just need to be able to locate it on your device to attach it to the exam. So that's the important thing, how you're going to locate that recording. So practice that now so that you have it ready to go on exam day. And then preparing the answer sheet, we talked about all of that. I want to go to this one right here, practice with sample questions, which we have been doing. And hopefully you will tune in again tomorrow, because Mrs. Foote is going to do a whole nother sample AP exam that you can practice the timing and everything with. So right here, it says, on exam day, all questions will appear in a regular web browser, which will allow you to operate other software or apps at the same time. You should use the sample questions to practice exactly how you plan to take the test. So tomorrow, I don't know how you did this yesterday, but tomorrow, if you're planning on doing it on your phone, or if you're planning on doing it on a tablet or an iPad, or if you're planning on doing it on a computer, take the test tomorrow using the actual device that you're going to use to take it on May 19th. Practice using the recording app, record your singing and practice pausing and restarting the recording, play back the recording to make sure the sound quality is clear, check about the file type, and then practice accessing the file and uploading it to a folder on your computer or phone. I think those are some very important things to think about. And I'm going to go back here. And now I want to do one more thing and talk about gathering your resources. And I talked about a little bit about this page last week, but I want to just say a few more things about it. And if you look, answering AP open book, open note exams are not easy. Answering AP exam questions takes more than copying information from notes. And of course, that's not even a possibility for us, because the content for us is it's questions that have been specifically written for this test, the part writing questions and the sight singing melodies. Finding facts, formulas, or other information in your notes is only one step to answering an exam question. You have to apply the information in order to complete the task. Well, the kinds of things that I would suggest that you might have handy are something like those chord matrices that I showed you at the beginning of our talk today. I think probably like the third bolded statement, more materials aren't always better. The more time you spend looking for something, the less time you'll have to use it in writing your answer. That's why I think those chord matrices can be really helpful to you. I'm not sure what else you might want. Maybe you would want a one-page description of part writing guidelines. But at this point, you ought to memorize those things. Like I gave you those 20 quick ideas for completing free response questions. You ought to be memorizing those kinds of things so that you don't have to be going and shuffling through papers and things trying to get the answers that you need. And anything that will help you speed up the part writing is what you need to do. I think with the practice for the sight singing, by this time, if you've been singing all year in your classes, you have a good sense of how to practice and prepare your performance and then record the performance. Oh my goodness, that's not for us. Class notes, your class notes are better than internet searches. I don't think we'd be going on the internet looking for anything. And then collaboration, of course, we talked about that some last week. You're not allowed to collaborate with each other on this exam. Well, I hope that once again, this test yesterday made it possible for you to, I'll end that slideshow and go back hopefully to my picture. All right. Hopefully the exam yesterday helped you practice the timing and everything. And tomorrow we'll give you another chance to practice that. Try and do everything. Even tomorrow, take a photo, and so on, if depending on how Mrs. Foote proctors the exam for you. But I, at this point, want to wish you a lot of great practice between now and May 19th. And I give you my best wishes for your success on the AP exam. I'm going to be back to kind of send you off on Friday along with Mrs. Foote. And I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, keep practicing. Get on the AP Live tomorrow and practice that other, the 2020 sample exam. And that will really, really help you get ready for the test. So with that said, have a great day, and I will see you Friday.